The linen napkin on my plate was folded into a swan. Someone, probably the catering company, had spent actual time creating this origami bird, its neck arched in permanent grace. I stared at it while voices swirled around me in the dining room, sharp and bright as the silverware catching late afternoon light. My stepmother, Destinée, was explaining the seating arrangement to newly arrived guests, her voice carrying that particular frequency that could slice through walls. Bryn sits here by Senator Gilmore, and Cameron will be beside Dean Hanks. They have so much to discuss about the new arts center funding. I was 39 years old. I had not lived in this house for 20 years. The swans stared back at me from the kitchen counter where I'd been directed to eat. Through the doorway, I could see my half-sister Cameron's hand resting on the armrest of her chair, walnut with those distinctive Wagner curves that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Bryn, my half-brother, wore a suit that had been tailored on Savile Row. I recognized the specific way the shoulder seam sat because I'd once sat through a briefing while someone wore an identical one. They were 28 and 31, respectively, and they had never known what it was like to be invisible in this house. But I had. Jolie, one of the caterers, a young woman with kind eyes and flour on her black apron, touched my elbow. "There's a seat here if you'd like. We have extra." The kindness was worse than the dismissal. I smiled at her, that smile I'd perfected over 2 decades of being professional in rooms where people wanted me dead, or afraid, or broken. "Thank you. I'm fine standing." Through the kitchen service window, I watched my father, Richard Eddings, laugh at something Senator Gilmore said. My father had married Destiny when I was 14, 6 years after my mother died of breast cancer. Destiny had 2 children from her first marriage. Within a year, I understood that I would always be the spare, the remnant, the girl who didn't quite fit the aesthetic of the new family portrait. My father never corrected her, not once in 25 years. "Government work," Destiny was saying now, her voice projecting toward the kitchen with perfect clarity. She knew I could hear her, she'd always known. Very stable, I'm sure, though Jolie has never been entirely clear about what she does. Something administrative, I gather. You know how bureaucracy is, layers upon layers of middle management. Dean Hanks made a polite sound. I watched him cut his salmon, the good salmon flown in from Scotland, not the farmed Atlantic variety the caterers were preparing for their own meal in the kitchen. I could have told them I hadn't eaten farmed salmon in 15 years, that I'd learned to identify every major drug cartel's operational signature by their packaging methods. That I spoke Spanish, Arabic, and enough Mandarin to conduct negotiations, that I'd sat across from men who'd killed dozens of people and convinced them to betray their organizations, that 3 U.S. presidents had received my briefings personally. But I'd stopped trying to tell them anything when I was 23, fresh from Quantico, when I'd tried to explain that I'd been recruited by the DEA and Destinée had said, "How wonderful, dear. Government benefits are excellent, I hear. Very stable pensions." The swan's paper neck bent slightly under the air conditioning vent. "Of course we wanted both girls to aim higher," Destinée continued. I couldn't see her face, but I could map it from memory, the way her mouth pursed slightly when she was performing concern. But Jolie has always been independent. Stubborn, really. She insists on this secretive little job instead of something we could talk about at gatherings. Something we could talk about. That was the core of it, wasn't it? Not my happiness. Not my success. Whether my existence could be converted into social currency at their dinner parties. Cameron worked in arts administration at a private gallery, the kind of job that sounded impressive and required a trust fund to survive in Manhattan. Bryn did something in finance that I'd never fully understood, but it involved a corner office and clients who owned islands. They were the success stories. I was the cautionary tale, the daughter who'd chosen wrong. If they knew what was in my bank account, they'd faint. But that wasn't the point. It had never been about money. It was about the right kind of success, the kind you could display like the Wagner chairs and the Scottish salmon and the original Rothko in the hallway that Destinée mentioned to every single visitor. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out carefully, angling it away from the caterers. A text from Marcus Paxton, my second-in-command. Situation developing. Vargas cartel shipment intercepted at Port Elizabeth. Manifest doesn't match intel, need your call. I typed back with one thumb, 20 minutes. The caterer had set out salad for the kitchen staff. Mixed greens, standard vinaigrette, nothing like the heirloom tomato and burrata they were serving in the dining room. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. I wondered if it was lost on Destiny, or if she'd orchestrated it deliberately. Probably deliberately. She was excellent at symbolism. "You should sit," the kind caterer said again. "Really, we don't mind." "I appreciate it," I said quietly, "but I need to stay on my feet. Work thing." She nodded like she understood, though she couldn't. Nobody in this house could. Through the window, I watched Bryn lean towards Senator Gilmore, animated about something. My half-brother had always been good at conversation. He'd inherited Destiny's gift for reading rooms and saying exactly what people wanted to hear. He'd never used that gift on me except to deliver small, precise cuts disguised as concern. "Still with the government thing?" he'd asked last Christmas. Must be fulfilling in its own way. In its own way. As if fulfillment came in hierarchies, and mine was several tiers below his. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a forwarded email flagged urgent from the director's office. I scanned it quickly. The Vargas shipment wasn't just drugs. There were precursor chemicals for fentanyl, enough to produce 50 million lethal doses. The operation had been 18 months in development. My operation. My intelligence network. My strategy that had finally caught them at the choke point. And I was standing in a kitchen, eating caterer food because my stepmother had decided that was where I belonged. I looked at the swan again. Someone had made it beautiful because they took pride in their work, even the work no one would see or appreciate. Even the garnish on a plate meant for the help. "Jolie!" Destiny's voice, bright and sharp. "Could you come here a moment?" I walked to the doorway. In the dining room, crystal water glasses caught the light. Not quite the chandelier cliché, but close. Tall windows overlooked the garden, where late August roses were still blooming pink and white. Every face turned toward me with varying degrees of interest or pity. "Senator Gilmore was just asking about you," Destiny said, her smile perfect. "I told him you work for the government. Something with records? Administrative services?" The senator was in his 60s, silver-haired, with the bland, pleasant face of someone who'd spent decades in politics. He nodded at me politely. "Public service is admirable work. We need dedicated people in every role." Every role. The diplomatic way of saying even the boring ones. "Yes," I said. "Just that. Yes." Destiny's smile flickered slightly. She'd been hoping for more, maybe. Some explanation she could dismiss. Some detail she could minimize. But I'd learned years ago not to give her ammunition. "Well," she said, recovering smoothly, "don't let us keep you. I know you probably have things to check on." Dismissed. Again, always. I returned to the kitchen. The caterers were plating dessert now. Individual chocolate soufflés with gold leaf beside the industrial sheet pan of brownies they'd made for themselves. I wondered what they thought about the disparity, if they noticed it, if they cared. My phone rang. Not a text this time. An actual call from Paxton, which meant the situation had escalated. I stepped out the back door into the garden, away from the kitchen's warmth and the dining room's laughter. "Talk to me," I said. "We have Vargas's brother," Paxton said without preamble. "He was supervising the shipment personally. He's asking for a deal. Says he'll give us the entire East Coast distribution network, but he'll only talk to you. He knows who you are. He asked for you by name." The roses smelled sweet in the evening air. Inside, through the tall windows, I could see them all at the table. My father, Destiny, Bryn, Cameron, the senator, the dean, all of them eating expensive food and discussing expensive things, utterly unaware that 12 blocks away, in a federal holding facility, one of the most dangerous drug traffickers in the Western Hemisphere was asking to speak to me. "I'm at a family thing," I said. "I can be there in 40 minutes. He's requesting transport to secure location for debrief. Says he'll only deal at the federal level. He's scared, boss. Really scared. Whatever he knows, it's big enough that he's willing to burn his entire family to save himself." Through the window, Cameron was laughing at something Bryn said, her head tilted back, elegant, everything I'd never managed to be in this family's eyes. "I'll authorize transport," I said. "Route him through the Brooklyn facility, have the deputy director join us. And Marcus?" Have someone pull up the senator's calendar for the next 24 hours. I want to know where he'll be. Senator Gilmore? He's there? At your family thing? He is. A pause. Then, boss, if you're about to do what I think you're about to do, just get me the calendar, Marcus. I hung up, stood there among the roses for a moment, breathing the evening air, feeling the weight of 25 years of small dismissals and careful erasures pressing against my spine. I'd built a career on patience, on watching and waiting and striking at exactly the right moment when the target was most vulnerable and least expecting it. I'd never thought I'd use those skills on my own family. But here we were. I walked back into the kitchen, checked my watch. The timing would be tight, but it would work. I knew the senator's patterns. I'd had him on surveillance for 3 months as part of a corruption investigation that was still classified. I knew when he checked his phone. I knew when he stepped away for calls. I knew exactly when he'd see the message I was about to trigger. The caterers were clearing the main course plates. Through the service window, I watched Destiny hold court, gesturing with her wine glass, her voice carrying. Simply can't understand why she won't consider something more visible, more suitable for someone with her background. My background. The daughter of Richard Eddings, Cornell graduate, from a family with actual history in this city. That background, the one she'd spent 25 years trying to erase and replace with her narrative, the disappointing stepdaughter who'd failed to launch. I pulled out my phone and sent 3 texts in quick succession. The first to Paxton, authorize immediate transport. I'll be there in 45. The second to my assistant director, execute phase 3 of Gilmore investigation. Send alert to his security detail now. The third to the deputy director, need you at Brooklyn facility. Bringing in Vargas's brother. It's happening. Then I waited. In the dining room, dessert was being served. Destiny had arranged for a small string quartet to play in the corner. I could hear the soft strains of Vivaldi drifting through the house. It was also carefully curated, so perfectly controlled. Until it wasn't. Senator Gilmore's phone buzzed first. I couldn't see his face from where I stood, but I saw him stiffen. Saw him reach for the phone, glance at the screen, and go very still. He stood up from the table without a word. Dean Hanks watched him go, confused. 30 seconds later, the dean's phone rang. He apologized quietly to Destiny and stepped away to answer it. In the kitchen, I leaned against the counter and watched through the service window as both men walked toward the back of the house, toward me, toward the kitchen, toward the woman they thought was just some administrative assistant in some forgettable government job. Destiny's voice carried from the dining room, pitched higher now with confusion. Senator? Is everything? They found me standing by the kitchen counter, still in the simple black dress I'd worn because I'd known Destiny would never let me sit at that table anyway. The senator's face was gray. The dean looked like he might be sick. Administrator Bannister, Senator Gilmore said. His voice was very quiet, very careful. In the dining room, the conversation died. I heard Destiny's sharp intake of breath, heard her chair scrape as she stood, heard her footsteps coming toward the kitchen. She stopped in the doorway, stared at the senator, at the dean, at me. I apologize for the interruption, Senator Gilmore said, still looking at me, only at me. I've just been informed that my security detail has been elevated to federal protection due to credible threats from the Vargas cartel. They tell me you've just apprehended Diego Vargas, that he's cooperating, that this operation has been yours from the beginning. The dean was pulling up something on his phone. I knew what it was because I'd written most of it. The DEA press release from 3 years ago, when I'd been appointed administrator, the second youngest person ever to hold the position, the first woman to run the agency in 20 years. Destiny's mouth opened. No sound came out. Administrator, the dean said, and his voice cracked slightly on the title. We weren't told, no one said. No one asked, I said simply. Through the doorway I could see my father standing now too. Bryn and Cameron were still seated, frozen, their expensive clothing and expensive education suddenly meaningless in the face of something they couldn't buy or socially position their way around. The senator was still talking, something about threat assessments and federal coordination, but I wasn't really listening. I was watching Destiny's face as she calculated, recalculated, as every dinner party conversation where she'd minimized me, every family gathering where she'd positioned me with the help, every carefully constructed narrative about my failure played back in her mind and shattered against this new, undeniable reality. "You'll need to leave," I said to the senator, quiet, professional, the same tone I used in briefings with the Joint Chiefs. "Your security detail will be here in approximately 8 minutes. I've arranged for a secure vehicle to take you to a safe location until we fully assess the threat level." "Of course," he said. "Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt your evening." Your evening. As if this were my party, my house, my family. He left. The dean followed, stammering apologies to Destiny that she didn't seem to hear. In the silence that followed, my father finally found his voice. "Jolie. You're the DEA administrator?" "Yes." "For how long?" 3 years. I've been with the agency for 16 years total." Kamran made a small sound. Not quite a laugh, not quite a sob, but you said you worked in government." "I do work in government." "You let us think." Bryn started, then stopped. Because what had I let them think? I'd told them I worked for the federal government. I'd told them it was classified work. I'd told them I couldn't discuss details. They'd filled in the blanks themselves, painted me as small because it was easier than imagining I might be something else. Destiny found her voice. "This entire time, you've been lying to us." "No," I said, "I've been exactly who I said I was. You just decided that wasn't good enough." "We had a United States Senator in our home," she said, her voice rising, "and you embarrassed us." "I saved his life," I said quietly. "The Vargas cartel had assets positioned to intercept him tonight. Your dinner party was on their surveillance list because of his attendance. My team has been monitoring the situation for 3 months. The only reason he's alive is because I authorized the operation that brought Diego Vargas in before they could execute their plan." The words hung in the air like smoke. My father sank into one of the kitchen chairs, the simple wooden ones meant for staff. He looked old suddenly, older than I'd ever seen him. "All this time," he said. "All these years. We thought—" "I know what you thought," I said. Cameron was crying now, quietly, her perfect makeup running in thin black lines down her cheeks. Bryn stood in the doorway, his Savile Row suit suddenly looking like a costume, like he was playing dress-up in a world that had just revealed itself to be far more complex than he'd imagined. "I should go," I said. "I have a debrief to conduct, a national security situation to manage, you understand." I picked up my bag from where I'd left it by the door. The caterers had melted away into the back of the kitchen, probably terrified, probably wondering what kind of family drama they'd stumbled into. "Jolie." My father's voice stopped me. I'm sorry, I should've." "Yes," I said, "you should have." Quote, I walked out the back door, through the garden with its late summer roses, into the driveway where my car was parked behind Bryn's Mercedes and Cameron's BMW. A black Suburban pulled up as I reached my vehicle. My security detail, always there, always watching, invisible until they were needed. Agent Fierro stepped out. "Administrator, we're ready when you are." 5 minutes, I said. "I need to make a call." I sat in my car, a simple sedan, nothing flashy, nothing that screamed federal salary scale, and let myself breathe for the first time in 3 hours. My hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear, from the release of something I'd been holding on to for so long, I'd forgotten it was there. Through the kitchen window I could see them all standing in various poses of shock and incomprehension. Destiny had collapsed into a chair. My father had his head in his hands. Bryn and Cameron stood together, for once united in their disorientation. The paper swan was probably still on the counter where I'd left it. I started the car. Behind me, the Suburban's engine rumbled to life. My phone showed 6 new messages, all urgent, all demanding my attention, all part of a world that had nothing to do with dinner parties and seating arrangements, and the careful social calculus of who belonged at which table. I belonged at the head of the table at the DEA. I belonged in rooms where presidents listened when I spoke. I belonged in negotiations with the most dangerous criminals in the hemisphere. I belonged in strategy sessions that shaped national policy. I just never belonged here. And maybe, I realized as I pulled out of the driveway, as I watched the house grow smaller in my rearview mirror, maybe that was okay. Maybe it had always been okay, and I'd just been too tired from trying to convince them otherwise to see it. My phone rang. Paxton. "I'm en route," I said. "ETA 30 minutes. Tell Vargas I'm coming. Copy that, boss. For what it's worth, I hope you made them hurt. I thought about Destiny's face, about the senator using my title in front of them, about my father realizing that his daughter, the one he'd let become invisible, had been holding one of the most powerful positions in federal law enforcement while he'd smiled through Destiny's dismissals. I did, I said, in exactly the way they'd understand. I hung up and drove toward Brooklyn, toward the debrief, toward the work that had always mattered more than their approval. The August evening was warm, and through the open window I could smell the city, exhaust and ambition, and the particular electricity that came from 8 million people all wanting something. I'd wanted them to see me. For 25 years I'd wanted them to see me. And now they did. Now they couldn't look away. It felt exactly like I'd imagined it would, vindicating and hollow and necessary and sad, all of it at once. The truth usually was.